So our goal when we started this was that we wanted to meet short-term needs until the supply chain caught up. So hospitals were in high demand of, and still are, of face shields, of gowns, of the masks that I mentioned, of all sorts of personal protective equipment. And donations can only go so far. So now that we've gotten that out of the way, I'm going to tell a little story that started about 3 weeks ago. And that's a picture of me and one of my students, Michael Koenig, who went downtown, and you can see we're wearing gloves. And we liberated, as we like to say, all of our machines from the makerspace, which essentially means we took as much as we could and we fitted into the back of my minivan. And then I dispersed the machines all around the city of Chicago and the suburbs with my student employees, as well as a faculty member, Eric Landau, and his wife, Sarah Rice, who have been making PPE up in the Lincoln Park area using our 3D printers. So we liberated all of these machines and we brought them home because we thought it would be important to be doing this work at our home where we could stay safe. And then we would figure out how to get the things that we made to the people who needed them without increasing the likelihood of transmission and so forth. So quickly from there, we expanded out from DePaul into working with a lot of other institutions, including Chicago Public Library, people from Chicago Public Schools, Museum of Science and Industry, other universities that we're now talking to and working with, like people from Loyola and University of Chicago, churches. So Peace Church and Jackie Moore, who works with Peace Church, they've got 3 groups that we have around the city working on developing PPE. And a lot of other institutions. And basically, these are all the good people who are on the board of advisors at the Idea Realization Lab, which is the makerspaces that I run at DePaul. So real briefly, I want to talk about why we chose nodes, though, because I think that's really important to this whole concept. One is that nodes are resilient. So if some of you are familiar with the idea of mesh networks are resilient because if too much traffic attacks one node, then it can distribute that traffic, that node can distribute that traffic amongst other nodes. And it also allows for multiplication. In other words, if you think of these nodes as like cellular growth, right? You have a node that might grow to be 30 people, which is unmanageable. And then what you do is you split that node into 2 pieces and it grows outward and outward and outward. The nodes also make local connections to the hospitals and institutions. In fact, a lot of institutions are still saying they don't want or they won't accept PPE. And this is something, handmade PPE, I'm sorry. And this is something that was, especially early on, was fairly like across the board. And so what we ended up doing was, because our local nodes knew these doctors and had personal relationships with them, we would take bike couriers who are out of work and have them bring the equipment directly to the hospital, or not the hospital, directly to the doctor's house. And then they would take it into the hospitals for them. So those local nodes were able to establish those connections. And so the first thing we did was we put up a fundraiser, and the fundraiser gives us the ability to purchase materials. So if you have a lot of makers all around the city of Chicago and the state of Illinois making things, they're not going to want to, at some point it's going to become unsustainable to put your own money into buying 3D printing filament, into buying cloth and things of that nature. And it really costs tens of thousands of dollars for a large scale effort like ours to work. So we decided early on that we would bring in the funding, and that we would use that funding to help support people who are making things. So we get the funding, we buy the materials, and we get them shipped directly to the houses of people who are operating in our nodes. So the material gets to the nodes, and then the nodes make things. So this is really a distributed fabrication model, or distributed manufacturing model. So the materials are delivered to the fabricators. They fabricate the stuff that's needed, the stuff that I've been talking about and I showed you. And then, so we've got the materials getting delivered to the makers. The makers make things, and then how do they get to the hospitals? Well, I mentioned bike couriers already. They've been fantastic. Our Lincoln Park node, led by Eric Landau and Sarah Rice, kind of modeled this whole thing out, and it works fantastic. So we have bike couriers. We're also working with a group of medical students from Get Me PPE. They're another local, Get Me PPE Chicago. They're another local group that's excellent to work with, and the medical students generally know where things need to go in hospitals because that's where they work. We also have a partnership with the city of Chicago through Jesse Lava, and we're delivering a lot of our stuff to the United Center now, and then that's getting shifted out to the 2 places in need. And then finally, we're actually using veterans through Ray Dukeson, who's part of our group. And Ray is arranging veterans who are essentially couriers to take plastic and materials from point A to point B. So we've got the materials, things getting fabricated, and things getting to places, but how do we know what the right places are to get them to? Well, we kind of have our own priority matrix, and it sounds a little bit like the mafia maybe, but part of the priority matrix is, well, if you're making things as a volunteer locally, the first people you're probably going to want to help are also the people who you know and who are around you. And so the priority matrix goes, take care of the people you know and the people who are with you. Get the rest of your stuff either to the group of medical students that I mentioned, who then take things to the institutions in need, or deliver it to the United Center, which then distributes it based on the models that the city has, or we use our veterans to kind of get things to places. And then why are we doing this as Illinois PPE, and why aren't we doing this as like a national effort or something like that? And really, the decision was made because that's just how all of these solutions seem to be playing out right now, right? So people are working in states because states are essentially having to fend for themselves. And so we figured that's the scope that we wanted to address, and that's the people that we knew in makerspaces all around the state too.